I've seen demonstrations of AI pharmacists that basically phone you up after you got your medication a few days later. It's like a human voice asking you, hey, Mike, how's that cholesterol medication? Is any side effects you're feeling? And it's like a real voice, but it's AI. And it's smart enough to understand my answers. I'm like, oh no, I'm on the toilet all night. So it's smart enough then to go, oh, okay, you need to go back to the pharmacist, or it'll ask you, hey, can I set up an appointment for you to go see your doctor? And so I know some people, I don't want to talk to a computer, but a lot of times you might not have a choice because you can't get a hold of your doctor or your pharmacist because they're so busy and overwhelmed. There's not enough of them. So we're going to see a lot of that over the next 5 to 10 years.
This is Coming of Age, Meeting the Needs of Our Aging Population, a podcast about how we can better support our seniors. I'm your host, Donna Duncan. I am also the CEO of the Ontario Long-Term Care Association, which represents about 70% of long-term care homes in Ontario, Canada. This episode was generously sponsored by our sector champion, Point Click Care. Point Click Care is a leading healthcare technology platform enabling meaningful collaboration and access to real-time insights at any stage of a patient's healthcare journey. Point Click Care's single platform spans the care continuum, fostering proactive, holistic decision-making and improved outcomes for all. Over 25,000 long-term post-acute care providers and more than 1,600 hospitals use Point Click Care today. For more information on Point Click Care's software solutions, visit pointclickcare.com. Welcome to a new episode of Coming of Age. Technology has the potential to make our lives easier, if we can keep up with it. As the first of the baby boomers soon turn 80, we know that age-friendly technologies will play a pivotal role in shaping how they live, where they live, and how they connect with their loved ones. But how do we know what gadgets are best? From tracking our health and activity, staying connected with loved ones, monitoring the stove to see if it's been left on, and generally making living at home easier. In today's episode, we're diving into the world of emerging age-friendly technologies with digital living expert Mike Agerbo. Mike has been a TV, radio, and podcast host for 20 years. And on his show, Get Connected, he shares emerging trends, tests new gadgets, interviews experts, and, in general, makes technology easier to understand for people like you and me. But what sets Mike apart and makes him uniquely qualified for today's discussion is that he's not only a tech guru, he's also been a caregiver for his parents as they grow older and needed more support with their health. Drawing from his deep knowledge of age-friendly technologies, Mike built a digital network around his parents to make living at home easier for them, but also to help him feel more confident as their caregiver. In our discussion, Mike shares a wealth of knowledge about the technologies that are out there today, how to find them, and most importantly, how to use them to enhance our loved ones' health, wellness, safety, and independence at home. We'll also explore the exciting possibilities for the future that will soon unfold before our eyes. Let's dive in. I am so delighted to be joined by you, Mike, today. You are actually our first digital living expert to join our podcast, and I really do think it's quite timely. I know that you've been testing and trying new approaches on how to use technology as you have supported your parents. So how can technology become an enabler as people age?
Well, yeah, that's a pretty open question. Obviously, we're going to dig deeper into that in the show. Yeah, I've been doing technology for more than 30 years now, TV and radio and what have you. It's been great for me to have this knowledge to help look after my parents as they've been aging. And I guess my overall message today is just find the tools that work from a health monitoring aspect and a communication aspect and just keep it simple. There's a lot of exciting tech happening out there right now and a lot of developments, but the simpler you can keep it, the more quality time you'll be able to have, with your aging loved ones and be able to keep more connected with them.
Keeping it simple really is the key. When I think back to the old VCRs that always blinked and flashed.
It can be more complicated now. Yes, technology has made a lot of things simpler, but at the same time, there's just like a million different things you can do with technology, which kind of makes it more complicated.
And a million different things to figure out what went wrong.
Exactly. I love using technology to monitor their health, for example, as far as the wearables go, and just some simple things to automate and keep track of some of the things that are going on in their homes too.
We've been hearing a lot in the seniors care, living in care sector about how people don't want to go into long-term care. We know that baby boomers really don't see themselves as ever needing to move into a long-term care setting. But we also know there's a certain percentage of the population that is going to need more specialized care. But our wait lists are astronomical. So in Ontario alone, we have 40,000 people waiting for long-term care. So how can we support people to continue to live in their homes? So you've talked about the monitoring aspects. What does that bundle of monitoring tools look like?
I like to keep on top of their overall health, making sure that they're getting in enough activity during the day and also be alerted if anything happens, whether they have a fall. My father, for example, he's 87 years old. He's living on his own now. My mother just passed away a short time ago. So he has an Apple Watch that is paired with his iPhone. He's given me permission to get the data from that watch whenever I need to see it and the alerts as well. So I can see how much activity he's getting a day, which is fantastic, actually. He's getting more activity than I am, like more steps in the day than I am. It's great because I can also see the days maybe he's not getting as many steps in, and maybe that's because he's not feeling well. And then I can obviously give him a call and make sure he's okay. On top of that, he also has a heart condition, atrial fibrillation. He's on medication for it, which is great, but I can also get alerts when there is anything happening there as well, and obviously check in on with him again. Then you can take that further. So with that particular solution, and I do like the Apple Watch because that's kind of one of the more simpler ones out there. There's a lot of Android stuff as well for the Android folks out there, but it's a little more complicated. So I'm always about simple. And so the simpler it can be, the more effective it's going to be used. On top of that, there's other services as well. I'm really partial to some of TELUS's Living Well devices, and they've got a few different solutions there. They've got one that the family member can wear while they're in the home that is monitored 24/7. So if there's ever any issues, there's also a little call button on there. They can actually reach out and talk to someone if they need some help. Taking that another level, they've got another device that can go out with them like outside of the home. It's got a built-in GPS as well. And that was something I found important. My mother, when she was still with us, had Alzheimer's, and she actually wandered away from the home a few times. So having a device like that would aid in finding her very, very quickly. And then finally, TELUS also has a service for folks that already have an Apple Watch, or you can get an Apple Watch through them where they can, again, monitor your loved ones through that. In the big scheme of things, it's a small price to pay for peace of mind and making sure that your parents or loved ones are safe.
It's a great approach as you think about keeping it simple. So knowing that those products exist, one of the things we know is that the trend has been for family members to move away from their parents. So either individuals or the parents are living in a rural community and their kids have moved to the city, or the parents are in the city and their kids have moved to a smaller community because that's where there's affordable housing. So we have so many cases where the family caregiver isn't actually in the same geography. So to be able to use these remote monitoring approaches and to have a line of sight as to what's happening with your mom and dad or other people for whom you may be caring really does bring a very elegant solution.
It's life-changing. I am very fortunate. I only live 5 minutes away from my father. But my brother, for example, he lives over an hour away. So obviously there's more travel time there. And like you were saying, sometimes your loved ones in a whole other province or across the country. So being able to keep connected, of course, with everyone's permission, is just a fantastic way, again, to keep those channels of communication open and just to make sure everyone's safe and sound, so that when you do get that time for that great face-to-face time, you don't have to use a lot of it just going through a lot of the basics there. You've already got that covered because you've been connected the entire time.
When I think back to when my father was living with Alzheimer's and was still at home with us, he was a wanderer as well. And we had to register him with the police department, and he wore a special bracelet.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when he did wander off, we couldn't find him that readily.
Another simple solution, AirTags, those little Apple AirTags or tile trackers. Again, with permission, that's something that could be put on a keychain or in a pocket or in a wallet as well to help keep track.
And Mike, what does permission look like? Is it just a verbal permission?
I guess that's just a verbal communication with you and your family members, right? I'm not writing out any contracts with my parents saying, hey, I've got some cameras here. I'm monitoring your Apple Watch. I sat down with them. They were happy to have these tools. They were happy because it made them feel safer. My mom, when she was still with us, loved her Apple Watch. She just loved knowing how many steps she was getting in and how many calories she was burning. And it made her feel good too, knowing that I could monitor if there was any falls or anything like that. So I sat down with them and just very clearly explained what these tools did and what kind of access I would have if they were okay with that.
Well, that's really helpful, and just being sure that they know what you're doing and that it's not hidden cameras. It really is that transparency and doing this in partnership with them.
Yeah. I do have a Ring video doorbell camera on their door. And there's a number of different types of makes and models out there. I like the Ring one. It ties in with my Amazon account and what have you. And they live in an apartment, so it's one of those kind of peephole cameras. I haven't put any cameras inside their homes. Maybe some people that might be something they need, but I don't have any cameras like watching them while they're watching TV or cooking dinner. It is an option.
So you've been chatting a bit about the monitoring aspects. What is digital living like where you can use technology to enhance safety in a different kind of way?
Yeah, there's all sorts of different tools. There's a number of different connected plugs out there. One, I think it's called Wallflower. It goes in the plug behind the stove, and then you plug your stove into this plug and tied in with their Wi-Fi. And this thing is fantastic because if the stove is left on for an extended period of time, I get an alert on my phone basically saying, hey, your parents' stove's been going for an hour. Maybe you should check on that. I also got them a robot vacuum. These robot vacuums are amazing now. I hooked one of those up and I can set it on a schedule if necessary. But I've also tied it in with one of their digital voice assistants, like an Amazon Alexa device. So they can basically tell Dusty, that's the name they gave it, to vacuum the kitchen or the whole home. And they just love it. They think it's so cool. And that's the next step, like a digital assistant. My parents love the one I put in there. Amazon's got their Echo devices that use the Alexa voice assistant, and Google's got their Google Homes. So they're both great products. And I got one with a screen on it as well. And it's fantastic because my parents used it all the time for asking it to play their favorite radio station. And then also because it was tied in with the vacuum, and I did a couple connected lights as well. They were able to use their voice to turn things on and off there. Sky's the limit when you can put all these devices in there. I just try to keep it as simple as possible. And also because it had the screen on it, it was great because I tied that in with my photo account. So I just had pictures of the grandkids just coming up constantly. That was a great tool because eventually my mom went into a care home, and I had put one of those on her bedside table. So she was always connected with great photos and memories of the family.
What are the other uses for these virtual assistants? Can you communicate with your parents?
You'll want to get one that has the built-in camera. And for those concerned about privacy, you can turn the cameras on and off from a physical standpoint. But they were great for video calls. So my brother, for example, he's an hour away, so he doesn't get to see them face-to-face as much as I would. So he could just do a video call from his phone. And that would pop up. It would ring on their screen in the kitchen there, and they could just answer it and have a great little video call. Or they could use their voice to video call any family member, like myself or my brother. So that was cool. They also used it for grocery lists because it could keep a running list, and then I would have access to that as well, and I could go get groceries for them. And again, the sky's the limit. There's so many different things you can do with these digital assistants. I tied my Uber account into it as well, so they could actually ask it to call an Uber. You can also tie in some of your favorite video streaming accounts to it as well. So for my mom, when she was in the care home, we could tie in Amazon Prime Video account, and she could just ask it to play shows on the device. So, and they've got different size screens as well, like little 5-inch ones or 12-inch ones, depending on how you want to go.
In some cases, it gets a little complicated with trying to remember the commands and the passwords. Again, keeping it simple. How simple is a command?
Well, for whether it's Google or Alexa, you basically say, Alexa, get Dusty to clean the house. So that's pretty simple. What I ended up doing, I made up a list on my computer, and then I printed it out, just like a little card, and laminated that and made a few copies. My mom always had one on the kitchen counter, or when she was in the care home, there was like a little card there as well. So if she forgot any of the commands, she knew that she could just go to that card. I would highly recommend. These devices are so cheap now. Amazon's got them on sale like almost always. So you can pick them up $100 or less in many cases.
Do you use the assistant for checking to see they're taking their medication, or are there other tools?
Yeah, that's another great aspect of it. Yes, you can actually set up reminders. I can go in on my phone and basically through their digital assistant actually set up reminders on it at 8 a.m. and noon or whenever they need to take their pills, and it'll come up as a little voice reminder on the screen and actually speak out to them as well. There's also these connected pill dispensers. There's just a few different types out in the market. I know some pharmacies sell or give them away. I tried a couple. So basically I would just take the week's supply of pills and stick them in this machine. And because it was connected, it would remind them via a little voice on the dispenser. I also would get alerts whether they actually opened up the little tray to take the pills. Whether they took them or not, I don't know. Sometimes those things are hundreds of dollars. I just, how effective they are. I never really got a good mojo going with that thing, because I'd always have to go and fill up the pills every week. So if you're not near them, then that's a problem, right? So just doing even like a simple reminder, like even something that comes up on their phone or on like your digital screen assistant, that's probably a simpler way to go.
Their Apple Watch.
Or their Apple Watch, yes. Everyone's wearing these wearables now. It's funny, my dad was a Danish watchmaker, and he just loves his Apple Watch.
You've talked about all of these different devices, and they can give verbal messages. Do they all have the same voice? Can your parents differentiate?
Yeah, and you can change voices on these things, whether you want a female or male voice, what kind of accent you want. Mostly it's Alexa talking to them. Yes, you can have a Google device, an Alexa device. I just try to keep it to as few ecosystems as possible.
To that point, Mike, you really built out a digital household for your parents in this regard and connected your household with their household. How well do these different devices interconnect?
It's getting better, but there are different ecosystems out there. Apple's got their own ecosystem. Amazon with Alexa's got their own ecosystem. Of course, Google's the other player out there. They have standards now where they're all supposed to work and talk with each other better. But I think we're still a few years away from really simple, true, good integration. So my ecosystems are the Apple world with the Apple Watch and iPhone, and the Amazon Alexa ecosystem. So again, if you can keep it simple, the fewer things going on, the better.
I've got a lot of unused apps on my phone, but there are always updates as well. Is that something you have to manage directly, or do your parents know when there might be a software update that needs to be uploaded?
Fantastic question. I have, wherever I can, automatic updates turned on just so that just happens. So I rarely have to go into a phone or a device to update it. It's just automatically happening in the background, which I think is great. Again, on their iPhones, my mom had an iPhone, but she didn't really use it. She didn't know how to get into the apps or anything. My dad's kind of the same thing. He just uses it as a phone, and he's figured out the camera now, which has been great for him. But getting him to read text, no, it's not going to happen. And he's not going to get into any of the other apps as well. And I think you'll find that with kind of the older generation. So before you start loading all these cool apps on their their phone, just make sure that they want to use them or even know how to use them.
Yeah, exactly. I want to go back to the point that you made about getting consent. And you'd mentioned that your mother was with you, and I'm so sorry for your loss. It's never an easy thing for any one of us. And I know you'd mentioned that she'd been in a care home, and that you used a device in the care home. Did you have to get the permission from the long-term care home to set that up?
That Alexa device I put in there, it's got a camera built into it. Do you know what I mean? So I told the nurses about it, so to make sure that they knew what was going on. And I physically turned the little camera off just because I don't want to be that weird, creepy guy. But it is a fantastic question. And I don't think a lot of care homes have really got policies around that yet.
It really is something that you've just triggered for me. And I was thinking back to the pandemic when care homes around the world were closed to visitors and virtual visits became the thing. And we had frontline staff who were supporting members with iPads to do virtual visits on Zoom or FaceTime. But as I'm thinking about this, there's such an interesting opportunity as we think about digital living in long-term care. What does that look like? Our association hosted a conference, and on the exhibit floor, there was a robot that was actually a waiter, but the waiter had face recognition. And while it was serving food, it could ask questions of the person it was serving, and depending on the response, could trigger an alert to the nurse.
Yeah, that technology is here now. Amazon, they have a little robot called Astro that they're beta testing right now. People can actually sign up to get this robot. I think it's a couple $1,000, but it's got little wheels. It's got a little screen for a face as well. Like you were saying, it can recognize faces. It can play music for you or your shows. It can go around the home from a security aspect and make sure everything's cool. It's got like a little periscope camera that comes out of its head. So it can actually go up and look above the kitchen counters and make sure things are turned off, like stoves. And one of the things they said that was a big use for it was just as a companion as well, because they're finding a lot of seniors were actually using it to talk to. My mom loved her Alexa device because she just loved asking a million questions. And Alexa never gets tired. Neither does Google. You can keep asking it a million questions about everything you've ever wanted to know. So but these robots are here. There was another one I've seen. It's more so in Asia, this little robot cat that just sits with you you can pet it and it purrs and it knows it's the different owners there. So we're going to be seeing more of that type of technology over the next few years, definitely.
And at one of our other podcasts this season, chatting with somebody from Australia who had done a study tour to Japan and was talking about how in Japan they're using so much more of these robotic companions. But it always does beg the question, where do you find the warm touch, though? Where are the warm hands in this?
Well, that's the $1 million question, right? Just where's the human aspect to it? In the absence of regular daily human contact with family members, which doesn't always happen, I know Japan is really on that robotic forefront. Their population is aging dramatically. Their birth rate is declining. So there's not enough humans or family members to look after the aging population. So I think a lot of these countries are going to look towards tools like that, whether they're robots or just better communication tools with video screens and what have you to connect with humans. Or even AI. AI, that's the next leap. You're going to be able to actually interact with AI bots that will actually sound like a human, and you'll be able to have conversations with them.
It's very sci-fi, but it is actually here.
It's here. It's here. They have these chatbots. They have these virtual avatars now that look like real human. Like you can have a video call with an AI avatar that looks like a real human. You can pick what kind of human you want it to look like. And it's going to get to the point in the next few years with voice cloning. I'll be able to input samples of my voice and it'll be able to scan me and create a likeness of me and can do video calls with Mike Agerbo. Everyone's dream come true, right?
Well, absolutely. You're charming.
I don't know about that. But so these are tools that are going to be available for caregiving and AI. It's advancing so dramatically, exponentially fast that even for me, someone who's been in the tech game for a few decades here, I've never seen anything like it. And just every day there's something new and just huge advances from that aspect. So from a caregiving aspect, that is something that I'm really trying to get in tune with right now.
And it really can be an enabler, as you said earlier, and free up those warm hands to do other things. So we know we've got staffing shortages in our health system. Home care is a real challenge. But if you've got Dusty, then
no, it's important. My mom back earlier this year, she had a fall and was in hospital. And I guess there's different levels of these hospitals, but she was in this kind of care ward. And they didn't have TVs or anything there. And I tried to visit her as often as I could, once or twice a day. Same with my dad. There are just hours that go by where she's just sitting there. She couldn't really read or anything like that. She's just alone with her thoughts, right? Because the nurses don't come around 20 times an hour, right? Maybe once every half an hour or an hour just to make sure that the patient's okay. So the more tools that we do have to just have some interaction, I think that's something we have to look at in the coming years.
It does make you think about the workforce as well. So if we're going to be introducing new technologies into our homes, but also into our care environments, whether it's hospitals, long-term care homes. In Ontario, our government is investing billions of dollars to build new long-term care homes. We know that a lot of the existing stock, which is much older, getting Wi-Fi installed was a real challenge. So it does make you think, what are we actually building for? And what do we need to contemplate even in these new buildings as we think about what the future could be?
Obviously, I think good connectivity and screens for communication with family members or AI caregivers. And I know everyone freaks out when I'm saying, an AI caregiver, but I'm just telling you that's the way it's going to go. There's not enough human caregivers in the system. We don't have enough doctors. My dad's doctor just retired and he can't get a new one. The hospitals don't have enough staff. So we are going to be looking at these computers and AI technology to help with that. And the technology's there. It's there.
Well, I know during the pandemic, mental health supports went entirely digital across the country. And suddenly a psychiatrist in Toronto could be doing a consultation or doing a therapy session with somebody in Thunder Bay or Sioux Lookout. So it's breaking down boundaries. And in Canada, we struggle and we're always talking about broadband, and we're talking about different communities who can't get internet still to this day. What can people do to bridge that challenge?
You touched on these rural communities that don't have great internet. I know a lot of the big carriers like TELUS, for example, that's one of their driving missions to connect these smaller communities. And I think they're doing a great job. But sometimes you might be in a location that just is underserved. Technology has caught up there. There's a few solutions. Starlink's probably one of the best ones. They're like a satellite internet provider. Starlink is a great solution for getting internet access literally anywhere, whether you're on a mountain, on a field up in the Northwest Territories. It's, I think, about $700 for the dish. They've got sales on these things all the time. I think right now they've got a sale on for $199. And then it's like $150 a month for the high-speed internet access. But sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. If you look at most homes now, their internet packages are in the $100 to $120 anyway, so it's competitive. And if you don't have internet or crummy internet, it is a lifesaver for keeping you connected.
Well, it's a great thing for Canada when you think about our geography to be able to bring that into your home as we're thinking about that connectivity of people who may live further away from one another. It's a how, not an if.
Then the next level is just Wi-Fi in the home as well, whether that's a larger home or an apartment, just making sure that you've got a good Wi-Fi router set up. Most of the carriers tell us they've got great Wi-Fi routers that can go in homes, clear up any dead spots. And there's some exciting new technology with Wi-Fi as well that some of these companies are rolling out. They're actually able to use Wi-Fi signals to detect falls. It can actually, humans are walking around in the apartment, interrupting the Wi-Fi signals. The router is able to actually identify humans. And if they have like a dramatic fall, they can actually alert caregivers as well. I think Linksys has this service down in the US right now. I don't know if they've rolled it out into Canada, but it is something that is coming as well.
What is your advice to caregivers who maybe don't have your expertise about where to start on technology? Again, where do you start, and where do you start with those discussions with your family members?
It comes back to keeping it simple. Most people are normal. They're not like me, just nerding out on all the latest tech. I think most caregivers, they have a smartphone of some type and are familiar with using an iPhone or an Android phone and apps. That's the first level. And I think a lot of caregivers probably have some type of wearable like an Apple Watch. So I think there's a familiarity with the basic aspects of the technology. I would start with some type of wearable, but again, sit down with the family member or parents, whoever you're looking after, and just have that conversation. You want them to be safe. These are some of the tools that we could potentially use, like an Apple Watch or one of these TELUS Living Well devices, and explain how they work and what kind of information is going back to the caregiver. It's a pretty simple discussion, and I think most folks would get behind that. And then from there, if they can set up an iPhone and an Apple Watch, they can do that for their family member as well. And it's actually really simple in the menus to give permission or send the data to another family member. Surprisingly simple.
Just building on that, you commented earlier about the smart pill dispenser that you can get at your pharmacy, but you said that you didn't find that it was all that useful. And I know there are some other technologies that are still evolving, whether it's a diagnostic cuff or a cardiac to track your heart rate or smart thermometers.
The wearables like the Apple Watches, they monitor the heart rate. And as long as you get one of the more newer models, they can detect irregular heartbeats and things like that. I'm not a doctor by any stretch, but at least I'm getting that information, and I can then tell my dad, hey, we should go contact the doctor. This looks unusual. Yeah, there's all sorts of technology out there. The pill thing, is it sustainable to keep up that system? There are smart toilets now. Withings has got this smart toilet seat thing where you can put in capsules, and when you pee into it, it'll tell you if there's something wrong. Cool. But that adds another layer of complexity. You talked about smart thermometers. One thing that might be cool are these smart scales for weighing. Those are cool because they're simple, right? Your parents, no matter how elderly they are, they've probably used a scale before. And if you get one of these connected ones, they're pretty cool. They can measure all sorts of stuff, not only just weight, body mass index and muscle and all that. And you can get that information sent to your smartphone as well. So, but yeah, the sky's the limit as far as these different devices. And it's a huge, huge industry. It's like a multi-billion-dollar industry right now. All these firms are just coming up with new ways to monitor health. But again, how simple is it is my question. Will you use it?
And is it useful information?
And for diabetics, my dad is diabetic, for example. They've got those little Libra Freestyle, for example, is one brand. They look like little coins that you stick on your arm, and it will just 24/7 monitor your glucose levels instead of having to prick your finger all the time. So that is cool. That's typically more for type 1 diabetics that need insulin all the time. But wow, that's such an advancement over how things used to have to be done. So obviously that's a must-have type of tool. And I know a lot of the healthcare plans actually cover those things.
So to your earlier point, will you use it? If there are so many products out there and so many new products coming onto the market, how does a layperson pick a winner?
It's a fantastic question. I always do research on these things. And there's hundreds of these devices that are coming out all the time. So I always try to research who's using these, if there's already reviews out there, what's happening with that. And I just always question myself, would I use this, or would people actually use this on a regular basis? Google is your friend. Just go online and see what experiences other people have had. And I know sometimes these are really new technologies, so there might not be a lot of reviews. But again, always, do I think I will use this, or my family member will use this? What's the complexity level like?
Really understanding, will it work the way it needs to work given whatever technology setup you have in your home?
You can end up spending hundreds or thousands of dollars on these things. I talked about that smart toilet. Is that going to be a regularly used thing for the amount of money that you're going to spend on it? I don't think it's ready for prime time yet. There's smart mirrors now as well that can detect things. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, having to set that thing up. And yeah, this is crazy.
Well, it's an interesting thing too. I know, having worked in and around the health system for the majority of my career, once you diagnose something, you've got to treat something. But there's often, do you want to rely on your toilet to tell you whether or not you've got something wrong with you? And what are you going to do with that information? Doctors always tell us not to Google things.
We have all this information, right? But where is it going? I feel for these doctors sometimes, all these patients coming, hey, I printed out my Apple Watch thing here. I think it's a useful tool, but is that information going to the doctor? No. Can we even access our own personal health records yet here in Canada in an easy way? No. Apple's done an amazing job down in the States, connecting with all the different health organizations down there. So Apple users in the US have really easy access to their health records, whereas we don't have that. Unless you know something I don't. But shouldn't we have access to that? I would love that. We have some basic stuff, but it's nowhere near what the US has yet. I know it's coming, but for me, it's not fast enough. And so again, you got all these devices monitoring things. Where is that information going?
That's where my next question is actually going. So there's a lot of data. And is it going to these companies? Do the companies have access to this data?
Typically not without your permission. They're really heavy on the privacy because as we've seen all the news stories, whenever there's any privacy breaches, they just get roasted on there. Again, like that smart toilet. Sure, okay, they peed, they've sent me this information. I don't know anything about this stuff, right? So then it's got to be sent to the doctor. The doctor's probably going, oh my God, doctor's going to have to end up doing a bunch of tests anyway. So you're right. Where does it go? And the whole privacy thing.
I think we're way more comfortable with sharing information now and accessing things and going online and online banking. If we could actually memorize all of our passwords, that would be a wonderful thing.
There's password managers out there that help with that, but it's another layer of complexity.
As we're thinking about the aging population, and I know my mother, she passed away in 2015, but she had a Mac. She had Facebook. She had lots of passwords. She gave me her passwords. So I was able, when she did pass away, I had access to all of her various accounts that she had, and I was able to manage those. Is that something you recommend people do as well? Just being aware where you have aging parents, if they are on social media or any of these platforms?
Oh, of course. Yeah. With my parents, they weren't overly tech savvy. So I just got them with their permission to give me up their usernames and passwords, which kind of set up for them anyway. So that was easy. If they don't want to give that up, at least set you up as a legacy contact in the different ecosystems you're in. Apple, you can easily go into the settings there and set up a legacy contact for one of your kids in case you pass. At least they have easy access to be able to get in and save your photos and have access to any accounts or gift cards and things like that. Same with Facebook. You can set up a legacy contact in there. I think that's important as well. So if you can think of anything digital, online banking, your credit card rewards points and things like that, start thinking about that now so that you would have easier access to that when they do pass.
That's great advice. So, final question. You talked about what you dream of. Knowing where we are today, and you by far have a greater sense of the possibilities than I could even begin to. As you dream about that future, what does it look like and how soon does it come?
With the advances of AI, there's going to be some dramatic innovations and leaps forward when it comes to healthcare and caregiving. Already, I've seen demonstrations of AI pharmacists that basically phone you up after you got your medication a few days later. It's like a human voice asking you, hey, Mike, how's that cholesterol medication? Is there any side effects you're feeling? And it's like a real voice, but it's AI. And it's smart enough to understand my answers. I'm like, oh no, I'm on the toilet all night. So it's smart enough then to go, oh, okay, you need to go back to the pharmacist, or it'll ask you, hey, can I set up an appointment for you to go see your doctor? And so I know some people, I don't want to talk to a computer, but a lot of times you might not have a choice because you can't get a hold of your doctor or your pharmacist because they're so busy and overwhelmed. There's not enough of them. So we're going to see a lot of that over the next 5 to 10 years, and just diagnostic technology as well. There's new AI technology that can basically scan people's eyes and detect whether they're going to get Parkinson's or not. because the AI has been trained to recognize the markers in the eyes from hundreds of thousands of scans of patients. So that's exciting to me. That's going to increase our lifespans and our health, I think, as we get older. And just the monitoring aspect, I think, is going to be amazing as well. How well is that going to work inside our homes? I talked about the Wi-Fi knowing if I've fallen. It apparently also can know if I'm agitated because it can read my heat signature and things like that and hear how my voice is. So it's crazy tech that's here now, but just it always takes 5 to 10 years to filter down into the mainstream.
The future is here. The future is now.
Yeah. So I know it's scary. It's change. Technology is always scary when you first hear about it. But as long as we've got good systems in place and privacy regulations, hopefully it'll ease us into that brave new world.
Well, it really is exciting. And as we think about people wanting to stay at home as they age, the people who want to stay well so that they won't need to go into long-term care or hospitals, this is really hopeful. This gives me great hope. It's very exciting. So thank you so much for sharing.
I really appreciate you having me on the program here and just sharing some of what I've learned. Hopefully it'll help some of the folks out there.
Thank you for listening to Coming of Age, the podcast that is changing the conversation on seniors' care and aging. We hope this episode brings a new perspective and inspires you to continue the conversation with your colleagues, friends, and family. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast so that more listeners will join our community of changemakers in seniors' care. Until next time, I'm your host, Donna Duncan. Keep well.